Senator O'Sullivan.
Acting Deputy President, and I rise tonight to reflect upon the life of a friend and a fellow political traveller in Alexander Rodney Lockie Wilson, known affectionately to all as Rod Wilson. Rod passed away less than a week ago. He was a pastoralist and cattleman of quite serious note, having built very substantial interests in that sector with his wife Sylvia and members of their family. Rod was a political activist. I'd known him for more than 35 years. As I mentioned, a fellow traveller, Rod was a giant within the movement of the National Party of Australia, both at our state level in the state of Queensland and at a national level. He was a community leader, having resided in the Callide and central Queensland area for most of their life. Rod and his family, including extended family, have made enormous contributions to those communities over that period of time. He also provided very clear leadership over the decades in agro-politics as well as general politics. And I have memory of any number of speeches or groupings and activities organised by Rod in his capacity as one of our leaders in that part of our state, and his influence was enormous. Rod was a very fair and measured individual who had a very practical and very acute political intellect. He demonstrated often that he was before his time in work that he done around issues that we now refer to as workplace health and safety. Long before that, Rod had often put people who worked for him and Sylvia and their family, and indeed members of the broader community, were in the core of his mind as he developed measures and practices around pastoral enterprises that he owned, with an emphasis on improving the safety and working conditions of those people. He was responsible for many innovative designs and process changes that have been adopted by so many in that industry. He was a pioneer in developing the use of hydraulic mechanisms that were used in double-decker cattle trucks so that cattle on the top deck could be loaded and unloaded safely using that system. He also done quite a bit of work using some innovative adjustments, engineering adjustments around the design of windmills, making the task, and I know a number of my colleagues here and those who are not present have had to do the laborious job of pulling bores, and Rod designed features around bores and windmills that made that job so much safer. He was an early adopter, for example, with the use of solar energies and retrofitted bores at great expense very early when that innovation of the use of solar pumps and solar energy come into the marketplace for use in pastoral pursuits. So with his wife Sylvia, Rod and family built what I think could be referred to as a cattle empire, with daughters Zoe and Eliza and son William and their broader family, and Rod always acknowledged the contribution of the people who worked with him. They built a very substantial business, and very frequently very frequently been blessed with those things that come with being a successful businessman. Rod would often reinvest not just his time and energy, but also financially into community and also other pursuits where he and Sylvia shared the goodness of life that they'd been blessed with. Rod will be remembered as an individual who had he had a great strength of character. He was a tall and quite imposing man, quietly spoken and very measured. His intellect and intelligence were often very evident in the delivery of his arguments that were always well structured and very persuasive. Rod was a man who'd done his homework on issues. He thoroughly understood his subject matter before he put forward his arguments. He'll be remembered also for his integrity and his honesty. And he and Sylvia and their entire family were enormously respected in the communities that they lived and that I referred to earlier. Rod also had a great sense of humour. When his darling twin daughters were born, Zoe and Eliza, he put an ad in the Queensland Country Life where he referred to them as welcoming two spring heifers. Sylvia, I understand, has never forgiven him for that, but nonetheless that was entirely consistent with Rod's way of life and his sense of humour. He will be remembered as a giant of a man, and he'll be remembered for his legacy of contribution where he had a serious influence around state and national agricultural policy. He was a leader in the field and was responsible for my party, the National Party of Australia. He was responsible for building and maintaining a very significant presence in central Queensland and had great influences, was very respected by our political movement in there. But I suspect if I had had the opportunity, which I did not, to ask Rod as to how he would like to be remembered, I'm quite certain that his answer would be very simple. He'd want to be remembered clearly as a very good and sound member of his community through life, but he'd be wanting to be remembered for the magnificent husband and father and grandfather to 8 grandchildren that he was. He's missed greatly by members of the Calliope and Central Queensland community. He's missed greatly by members of the inaugural National Party of Queensland and of Australia. He'll be remembered for the legacies around policy and initiatives that he drove and nurtured over many years. It's only been in recent months that Rod, very unwell and battling a condition that eventually overtook him recently, rang me about labour reforms around agriculture, about how people who would otherwise have difficulty getting employment because of age or other disabilities might be accommodated by changes in policy that would make it easier for them to be employed. Rod, you will be well remembered for all the things that I've spoken about and much, much more. To Sylvia and the children and the grandchildren and to Rod's extended family, I wish them all the condolences on behalf of all of those in our political movement over a long period of time who come to know Rod and work with him. I felt it was important that a contribution as significant as his was recorded in the annals of Hansard in our federal parliament, and I just hope, I really hope that Sylvia and family are able to confront Rod's loss and find peace in the knowledge of the enormous contribution that this man has made to our state and indeed to our nation.